If there was ever a contest for switching up on your bros the hardest, this guy would probably be the winner. Let me explain. So, to lay the groundwork here, in the early 400s BC, so like 2400 years ago, the Persians, who are like an Iranian people, they become the big power in the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean at the time, and they're deciding to invade Greece. So the ancient Greeks at this time have a common cultural identity, but politically they're divided into city states called polises. So, starting with Greek city states and colonies on the west side of Asia Minor and in what's now Turkey, the Persians start conquering or intimidating Greek city states into being incorporated into the Persian Empire. This goes really well until about 490, when the Greeks defeat the Persians at the Battle of Marathon near Athens, after which a guy runs 26 miles back to Athens and dies, which is how we get the inspiration for the modern marathon. But that's another story for another time. And in 480, the Greeks defeat the Persians at the Battle of Salamis. At the same time, the Greeks lose the land battle at a place called Thermopylae, which is the event that's depicted in the movie 300. But the Persians effectively decide to abandon their ambition to conquer Greece, and they kind of go back to what's now Turkey. So now that there's no common threat, the Greek city states, they're like, well, we might as well, get at it against each other now. So the two big powers at this time are Athens, which is a naval power. They have a bunch of ships, and Sparta, who they're, Spartans. They're famous for their warrior tradition. So the Athenians, they live in a democracy. And around the end of the Persian Wars, they found a giant vein of silver in the mines in what's called Lorien, which is their like main silver mine. So they have a bunch of money and they spend it all on ships. Unlike the Athenians, the Spartans live in this caste system where they are a warrior class that's on the top of society, and they rely on this military elite to maintain military readiness. So, anyways, the Spartans and the Athenians, they start going at it in 431 BC. And at the beginning, they're just kind of raiding each other's territories, and neither side is really winning the war. This goes on for about 15 years, and then this dude, Alcibiades, comes in. So he's a young nobleman, he's wealthy, and he's been very well educated, including by Pericles, who was the Athenian statesman who helped coordinate the development of the famous Acropolis, if you've ever been to Athens. Anyways, this Alcibiades kid, he's a really strong public speaker, and he gets up in the assembly and advocates for a military expedition to the island of Sicily, which has a bunch of Greek colonies on it, including one main city called Syracuse, which is allied with the Spartans. And he thinks that going here is going to break the stalemate in the war, and it's going to give Athens the upper hand. He's a leading nobleman, and he proposed the idea, so he's put as one of the people in charge of the expedition, and they're getting ready to head off. Now, at this time, all the Greeks, they believe in the Greek pantheon, Zeus, Minerva, Poseidon, Hera, those guys. And as part of their religious worship, there's these statues called herms everywhere, usually at roads, checkpoints, public places, anywhere you might want a good luck statue. And basically, a herm is a rectangular kind of column with a head on top and a wiener, a phallus attached to it. So the night before the expedition is supposed to leave, someone goes around Athens and smashes all the phalluses off of all the herms as a prank. And this is sacrilegious and really offensive to the Athenians, and some of his political opponents accuse Alcibiades of being behind this de-wienering, if you will. So Alcibiades knows he needs to leave, so he offers to stand trial immediately, but the wheels of justice turn slow, and they just send him on his way, and everybody gets going. So they got about 6,000 guys, and they're in ships, and they're just kind of going around the Mediterranean, trying to reach Sicily, going around the Adriatic until they get to the island and can, fight who they need to fight. So this takes them, months and months, because, we're talking the ancient world. Their ships aren't that sophisticated. And they're moving a lot of dudes, a lot of supplies, and they eventually reach Catania on the island of Sicily. And waiting there for them is an Athenian delegation, and they tell Alcibiades that he's being charged formally and that he needs to come back to Athens to stand trial. So Alcibiades and his friends, he realizes that this isn't great. They're facing the death penalty because, it's sacrilege or whatever. And they start returning to Athens with an escort. So at this point, we're going to leave the Athenian expedition, but if you want to know, they all die, and it is a big cause in Athens eventually losing the war. But that's none of Alcibiades and his buds' concern. They're on the way heading back. But at a town called Thurii in the boot of Italy, they shirk their escort and they run away. So Alcibiades knows that he's persona non grata in Athens. He's not going to be welcome back anytime soon. So he goes over the Spartans after first visiting a city called Argos, and he tells them that he'll help them if they agree to grant him asylum. And the Spartans are like, sure, you know what, that sounds great. You're a leading general, we'll take your services. So the Spartans kind of keep him at arm's length, but he's successful at convincing a bunch of Athenian allied city states to revolt or to no longer cooperate with the Athenians, because although they're allies, Athens and Sparta are not really nice to their allies. So these city states revolt, and Alcibiades does help the Spartan cause. So this is going around. This is happening around 413 BC, and all is going well until Alcibiades decides to start sleeping with the Spartan king's wife, and she becomes pregnant. And obviously, this is not going to do. And Alcibiades' main political benefactor, another Spartan general, he decides to retire at this time. So Alcibiades realizes that his time in Sparta is basically up after only a year there, and he needs to get going. So in 412, he decides to go to the Persians. He arrives in Asia Minor, so it's now Turkey, and he meets the local military governor or satrap called Tissaphernes. And he advises Tissaphernes, but again, he's not really given a bunch of troops or responsibility because, he's an outsider. And again, he tells Tissaphernes to bribe generals to instigate revolts and generally just sabotage and undermine the efforts of the Greek city states who are still a nominal enemy of the Persians. I should also mention that the Persians are financially and politically supporting the Spartans at this point. Now, another year goes by here, and Alcibiades decides that he doesn't really like this stuff. He wants to come back to Athens and reclaim all his property and reestablish himself as an upper middle class fuckboy, basically. So he goes to the island of Samos off the coast of Turkey, off the coast of Asia Minor, and tells the garrison there that if they can instigate a coup, he wants to come back. And his way to sweeten the deal on this is he emphasizes his relationship with the local Persian governor, Tissaphernes, and he tells them that it is going to bring a bunch of Persian ships and money to the Athenian cause in this war. So in 411, some of Alcibiades' old friends from Athens are in charge of the troops on Samos, and Alcibiades comes. He tells the troops that he's got all these allies in Persia, and he's basically strong and a cool guy, and he's going to help them win, which is really appealing to ancient soldiers because they're basically there for plunder and loot. So Alcibiades and his general friends, they go and they take over this garrison, and Alcibiades' political allies back in Athens instigate a coup. Everything's going swimmingly at this point, and with about 70 ships, Alcibiades wins a couple small battles against the Spartans, naval battles, and he figures he has enough political support to properly return at this point. In 407, he comes back to Athens. He still has a lot of enemies, obviously, but he manages to get himself appointed as head of the army. And then the next year, the Athenians go out and they fight the Spartans at a place called Notium. Long story short, the Athenians lose. There's a bunch of more drama and infighting among the Athenian generals, but Alcibiades has proved himself to be untrustworthy and they're not winning, so he goes. And 2 years later, in 404 BC, Athens officially loses the war, and Alcibiades decides that he shouldn't really stick around Athens any longer, and he goes up to Phrygia, which is in the north of Asia Minor, in what is now Turkey. And that's about it for Alcibiades. 2 years later, he walks out of his home. There are some assassins there. He tries to attack them with daggers, but they shoot him with an arrow. It's suspected that either the Persians or the Spartans sent these assassins, but it's a pretty heroic end to a pretty crazy guy.